She dressed to make her ex jealous, unaware a hot alpha was watching and claiming a kiss. The mirror didn't lie. Lillian Ziegler knew that much as she stood in her bedroom, the late afternoon light streaming through her window, turning her blonde hair to spun gold. The dress hugged every curve, emerald silk that whispered against her skin with each breath. She'd bought it months ago, tucked it away for a moment that mattered. Tonight was that moment. Not because she wanted to go, not because she cared anymore, but because her ex, David, would be there, and she needed him to see exactly what he'd lost. Her hands trembled slightly as she fastened the delicate clasp of her grandmother's pearl necklace. The smooth beads felt cool against her collarbone, a contrast to the heat of anger and hurt that still simmered beneath her carefully composed exterior. She'd tried on 3 other dresses before settling on this one. The emerald silk had been an impulse purchase during a particularly lonely lunch break, bought on a day when she'd walked past the boutique window and seen it displayed like a promise to herself that someday she'd have somewhere important to wear it, somewhere that mattered. The annual charity gala at the Boston Harbor Hotel, the event where Boston's elite gathered to sip champagne, exchange pleasantries, and pretend their donations came from generosity rather than tax write-offs. She'd avoided it last year, still too raw from the breakup. But tonight, something had shifted inside her. A quiet fury, perhaps. Or maybe just the exhaustion of caring. Her therapist had said it was progress. This desire to face what had broken her instead of hiding from it. Lillian wasn't sure she agreed. But here she was anyway, putting on armor in the form of designer silk. She painted her lips crimson, a shade darker than usual. War paint, she thought with a bitter smile. Her hand was steadier now, as she applied the color with precision, transforming her mouth into something bold and unapologetic. The reflection staring back at her was beautiful, yes, but there was something harder in her blue eyes now. A sharpness that hadn't been there a year ago. 30 years old, successful in her own right as a curator at the Museum of Fine Arts. Yet here she was, dressing for revenge instead of joy. The irony wasn't lost on her. The taxi ride through Boston's cobblestone streets felt like a journey toward a reckoning. October wind rattled the windows, leaves swirling in amber and crimson torrents outside. The city was dressed for autumn, and so was she, in a season of letting go. Trees lining Commonwealth Avenue blazed with color, their branches reaching toward a sky that was already darkening toward evening. The driver had the radio on low, some jazz station playing melancholy saxophone that matched her mood perfectly. Her phone buzzed. A text from her friend Sarah. "You've got this. Make him regret everything." She stared at the words, felt them land wrong. Did she want David to regret anything? Or did she just want to regret him less? Want to feel like the months she'd spent rebuilding herself had amounted to something? Want proof that she could walk back into that world and not crumble? But as the hotel's grand entrance came into view, all granite facade and gilded doors, Lillian felt her confidence waver. What was she doing? Playing games she'd outgrown, seeking validation from a man who'd never truly seen her. A man who'd looked at her passion and called it excessive, who'd heard her laughter and called it too loud, who'd wanted her to be a quieter, smaller version of herself. She almost told the driver to turn around, almost chickened out completely. Before we continue with the story, tell us where you're watching from and how old you are. I hope you enjoy the story. Then she remembered the last thing David had said to her 6 months ago, standing in her apartment while she'd cried, and he'd looked at her with something like pity. "You're too much, Lillian. Too intense. Too complicated. I need someone easier. Someone who doesn't require so much emotional energy." The words had felt like a verdict, like proof that there was something fundamentally wrong with her. Her jaw tightened. She paid the driver and stepped out onto the cobblestones, the October air biting at her bare shoulders. The dress had no mercy. Neither would she. Inside, the ballroom glittered like something from a dream, or perhaps a carefully constructed illusion. Crystal chandeliers cast prisms of light across marble floors polished to a mirror shine. The sound of string quartet music mingled with laughter and the clink of champagne glasses, creating a symphony of privilege and pretense. Women in designer gowns floated past like exotic birds, jewels at their throats catching the light. Men in tuxedos clustered in groups, discussing business and politics with practiced ease, their laughter too loud, their gestures too broad, performing success for an audience that was performing right back. The air smelled of expensive perfume and ambition, of old money and new schemes. Lillian had been to dozens of these events in her role at the museum, had learned to navigate them with professional grace. But tonight felt different. Tonight she wasn't here as the curator seeking donations. She was here as herself, vulnerable and determined in equal measure. Lillian accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and scanned the crowd, her heart hammering against her ribs. She took a sip, let the bubbles fizz on her tongue, used the moment to steady herself. There, by the bar, David, with his arm around someone new, a brunette in a pink dress, smiling up at him with the kind of uncomplicated adoration Lillian had once offered freely, before she'd learned that her adoration was too much, too demanding, too exhausting for him to handle. Something twisted in her chest. Not jealousy, she realized with surprise. Disappointment. In herself, forever thinking this would feel like victory. For believing that his regret could somehow validate her worth. For reducing herself to this petty game, when she'd spent months trying to rebuild into someone stronger. She lifted her chin and began to walk through the crowd, feeling eyes turn toward her. The dress worked its magic. She could feel the weight of attention, the appreciative glances, the subtle double takes. Men's conversations stuttered when she passed. Women assessed her with measuring looks, calculating where she fit in the social hierarchy, whether she was competition or irrelevant. It should have felt empowering. Instead, it felt hollow, like wearing a costume that didn't quite fit, like performing a role she'd outgrown, but didn't know how to quit. Each step toward David felt heavier than the last. She could see him more clearly now. He looked the same. Sandy hair perfectly styled, expensive watch glinting at his wrist, that easy smile he used like a weapon. The brunette beside him laughed at something he said, touched his arm with casual intimacy. Lillian felt nothing. Not the sharp pain she'd expected. Not the satisfaction of knowing she looked good. Just a vast, echoing emptiness. She didn't see the man watching her from across the room. Didn't notice the way his conversation had stopped mid-sentence. The way his whiskey glass had stilled halfway to his lips. Amber liquid catching the light. Didn't realize that while she'd been busy trying to make one man jealous, she'd captured the complete and undivided attention of someone far more dangerous. Someone who was already moving, already deciding, already claiming what his instincts told him was his. Alex Beckman had come to the gala out of obligation. His company, Beckman Security Solutions, had donated a substantial sum, and his presence was expected. He'd spent the better part of an hour listening to a city councilman drone on about urban development, nodding in the right places, saying the right things. His reputation in Boston was ironclad. Former Special Forces, now the owner of the most elite private security firm on the East Coast. Men feared him. Women wanted him. He kept both at a calculated distance. At 33, he'd built an empire on discipline, strategy, and an almost ruthless self-control. His tall, muscular frame was clothed in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his short blonde hair styled with military precision. No beard softened the sharp angles of his jaw. His gray eyes missed nothing. In boardrooms and war zones alike, he'd learned to read people, to anticipate their moves before they made them. It was a skill that had kept him alive overseas and made him invaluable to his clients now. But it was also exhausting. This constant vigilance, this inability to simply exist without analyzing every angle, every threat, every possible outcome. He'd been back stateside for 5 years now, but some nights he still woke reaching for a weapon that wasn't there, his heart pounding with adrenaline meant for battles long over. He'd built his company as a way to channel that energy, to use his training for something constructive, protecting others instead of destroying enemies. It worked, mostly. Gave him purpose. But it didn't fill the silence of his penthouse at 3 a.m. when the nightmares came. But when Lillian Ziegler walked into that ballroom, something in his carefully constructed world shifted. She moved like liquid silk, all grace and barely contained fire. The emerald dress should have been illegal, but it wasn't the dress that stopped him cold. It was her eyes. Even from across the room, he could see the storm in them. Hurt, anger, pride, a battlefield of emotions playing across features too beautiful for the pain they carried. She was armored in beauty, but underneath she was bleeding. He could see it in the set of her shoulders, too rigid to be natural, in the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes when she accepted a champagne glass from a passing waiter, in the deliberate grace of her movements, like she was performing rather than simply being. He recognized it because he'd worn that same armor once. Different battlefield, same war. His associate was still talking beside him, but Alex had stopped listening entirely. He watched as she made her way through the crowd, watched as men's heads turned, watched as she approached the bar where some pretty boy in an expensive suit had his arm around a woman who clearly wasn't her. Ah, that kind of night. Alex felt something primal stir in his chest. Possessiveness, which was absurd. He didn't know her, had never seen her before. But watching her square her shoulders and paint on a smile that didn't reach her eyes, watching her prepared to engage in some petty game of making an ex jealous, he felt an overwhelming urge to walk over there and claim her, to put himself between her and whatever pain she was trying so hard to disguise. He downed his whiskey in one smooth motion and set the glass on a passing tray. His associate said something questioning, but Alex was already moving, cutting through the crowd with the predatory grace of a man who'd spent years learning how to navigate hostile territory. He reached her just as she was about to approach her ex. His hand caught her wrist, firm but gentle, electric. Lillian spun, surprised, ready to deliver a cutting remark to whoever had dared touch her uninvited. The words died on her lips. The man standing before her was devastatingly handsome, in a way that had nothing to do with conventional beauty and everything to do with raw, masculine power. Tall, at least 6'3", with shoulders that strained against his tuxedo jacket. His gray eyes pinned her in place, intense and knowing. His face was all hard angles and sharp edges, but his hand on her wrist was careful, almost reverent. "You don't want to do this," he said. His voice was low, rough, intimate, despite the crowd around them. "Excuse me?" She tried to pull her wrist free, but he held firm. Not painful, just unyielding. "Whatever you're planning over there." He nodded toward David without breaking eye contact with her. "It won't give you what you're looking for." Anger flared hot in her chest. "You don't know anything about me." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I know you wore that dress as armor. I know you're here to prove something to someone who doesn't deserve the effort. And I know that in about 2 minutes, you're going to regret engaging in whatever game you've convinced yourself will heal old wounds." The accuracy of his assessment stole her breath. "Who the hell are you?" "Alex Beckman." He released her wrist but didn't step back. His presence surrounded her, created a bubble that somehow shut out the rest of the ballroom. "And you're going to dance with me instead." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the kind of confidence that came from a man who was used to getting what he wanted. She should have refused. Should have told him exactly where he could shove his arrogant presumptions. Instead, she found herself asking, "Why would I do that?" His eyes softened, just a fraction. Just enough for her to glimpse something beneath the hard exterior. "Because revenge is a cold meal, and you deserve better than cold tonight." Before she could respond, he'd taken her champagne glass and set it aside, then guided her toward the dance floor with a hand at the small of her back. The touch burned through the thin silk of her dress. Several heads turned as they passed. She heard whispers. "Beckman. That's Alex Beckman." "With who? I've never seen her before." On the dance floor, he pulled her into his arms with practiced ease. One hand settled at her waist, the other clasped her hand in his. The string quartet was playing something slow and haunting. Vivaldi, she thought distantly. One of the 4 seasons. Winter, perhaps. Appropriate for the chill that had lived in her chest for months. But most of her attention was consumed by the man holding her. He moved with surprising grace for someone so large, strong. She could feel the controlled power in every movement, in the way he led her effortlessly across the floor. His frame was solid against hers, all muscle and contained strength. There was something almost military in his precision, the way he navigated them through the other couples without ever breaking rhythm. Despite herself, she followed, her body responding to his before her mind could catch up. It had been so long since someone had held her like this, like she was something valuable, something worth protecting. The ballroom spun around them in a blur of light and color. Other couples danced nearby, but Lillian was aware only of him, the heat of his palm against her waist, burning through the thin silk, the calluses on his hand where it held hers, speaking of work that wasn't just pushing papers, the way he smelled, clean and masculine with a hint of something expensive and understated, cedar maybe, and underneath, something uniquely him. "You still haven't told me why you intervened," she said, trying to regain some control over a situation that had spiraled away from her the moment his hand touched her wrist. Her voice came out breathier than she intended, betrayed by the way her heart was racing. "Because watching you walk into a situation designed to hurt you was unacceptable," he said simply. "You don't know it would have hurt me." His gray eyes held hers. "Yes, I do." The certainty in his voice, the way he looked at her like he could see straight through her carefully constructed defenses, should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like relief, like someone had finally bothered to really look. "Is this what you do?" she asked, her voice sharper than intended. "Rescue damsels in distress at charity galas?" A hint of amusement flickered across his face. "No, this is a first." "Then why me?" He spun her slowly, bringing her back even closer than before. Her breath caught. "Because from the moment you walked into this room, I haven't been able to look at anything else." The honesty in his words, the complete lack of artifice, disarmed her. Men didn't talk like this, not in her experience. They played games, said what they thought you wanted to hear, hid their intentions behind pretty words and prettier lies. But there was nothing pretty about Alex Beckman. He was all hard edges and brutal honesty, and somehow that made him more compelling than any smooth-talking charmer she'd ever encountered. "I don't even know you," she whispered. "No," he agreed. "Not yet." The promise in those two words sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the October cold and everything to do with the heat in his eyes. They danced in silence for a moment, the music swelling around them. Lillian was acutely aware of every point of contact between them. His hand at her waist, firm and possessive, his other hand engulfing hers, calloused and strong. The scent of him, something clean and masculine with a hint of expensive cologne. The way he watched her, like she was the only person in the entire ballroom. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally, needing to understand his angle, his game. His expression shifted, became something softer, but no less intense. "Right now, I want to kiss you." Her heart slammed against her ribs. "You can't just say things like that." "Why not? It's true. We just met. Does that change what I want?" She didn't have an answer for that. Couldn't find words when he was looking at her like that, like she was something precious and necessary and utterly essential to his next breath. The music ended. They stopped moving, but neither released the other. Around them, couples parted, moving off the dance floor. They stood frozen, caught in a moment that felt suspended outside of time. "I should go," Lillian said, but made no move to leave his arms. "You could," Alex agreed. "Or you could let me take you out of here, away from whatever pain you came here to confront, away from games and pretense, just for tonight. I don't leave with strangers. Then get to know me." He reached up, tucked a strand of blonde hair behind her ear. The gesture was tender, at odds with the intensity in his eyes. "Ask me anything, 5 minutes. If you still want to walk away after that, I won't stop you." She knew this was insane. Knew she should politely decline and go find Sarah, drink too much champagne, laugh too loud, prove to David and herself that she was fine. Perfectly fine. But she was so tired of fine. So exhausted by the performance of being okay when inside she felt like she was slowly disappearing, piece by piece. 5 minutes, she agreed. He smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face, made him look younger and less dangerous. Then he led her off the dance floor, his hand never leaving her waist, toward a quieter corner of the ballroom where French doors opened onto a terrace overlooking the harbor. Outside, the October wind was sharper, biting. The terrace was nearly empty, just a few other couples scattered at the far edges, lost in their own conversations. The sudden quiet after the noise of the ballroom was almost disorienting. Lillian could hear the water lapping against the dock pilings below, the distant sound of traffic on Atlantic Avenue, the mournful call of a foghorn somewhere out in the harbor. Before she could shiver, Alex shrugged out of his tuxedo jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The silk lining still held his warmth, and it enveloped her like an embrace. She pulled it close, breathing in his scent more deeply now. Cedar and something smoky, mixed with laundry detergent, and that indefinable something that was just him. Below them, Boston Harbor glittered with reflected lights. The water was dark as ink, but the city's glow painted it in streaks of gold and silver. Boats bobbed gently at their moorings, their masts swaying with the rhythm of the waves. Across the water, the lights of East Boston twinkled like earthbound stars. The sound of the city was muted out here, replaced by the lap of water against stone and the distant call of a foghorn. The air tasted of salt and possibility. Alex leaned against the railing, his white dress shirt stark against the darkness. He'd rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms corded with muscle and traced with scars. Some were thin and pale, old. Others looked newer, angrier. Each one a story she didn't yet know but wanted to. Even in stillness, he radiated controlled power, like a predator at rest, but never truly relaxed. Always aware, always ready. 5 minutes, he reminded her. What do you want to know? Everything, she thought, but started simple. What do you do? For work. I run a private security firm, Beckman Security Solutions. We provide protection for high-profile clients, corporate security, risk assessment, that sort of thing. Former military? Special forces. 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq. That explained the way he moved, the coiled readiness she sensed in him. Why'd you leave? Something dark flickered in his eyes. Because I'd seen enough, done enough. I needed to come home and build something instead of destroying things. The rawness in his voice surprised her. This wasn't a man who shared easily. Yet here he was, offering her pieces of himself without her even having to dig. Your turn, she said. What do you want to know about me? Your name. She blinked. You don't know my name? You never said it. I just know you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, and you have terrible taste in ex-boyfriends. Despite everything, she laughed. The sound surprised her, bubbled up from somewhere she'd thought had gone silent months ago. Lillian. Lillian Ziegler. Lillian. He tested her name like it was something valuable, something to be savored. What do you do, Lillian Ziegler? I'm a curator at the Museum of Fine Arts. Renaissance art, primarily. His eyebrows rose. So, you spend your days surrounded by beauty. I spend my days surrounded by history. Other people's dreams and passion frozen in time. Sometimes it's beautiful. Sometimes it's tragic. Usually it's both. He studied her with those penetrating gray eyes. Which are you? The question landed like a physical touch. What? Beautiful or tragic? I don't know anymore, she admitted, the honesty surprising her. I used to think I was one thing. Put together, successful, content. Then everything fell apart and I realized I'd been performing my own life, curating it like one of my exhibits. Perfect on the outside, empty underneath. That's why you came tonight. To prove you weren't empty. To prove I wasn't broken. She corrected. There's a difference. Is there? He pushed off the railing, moved closer. Close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Because from where I'm standing, you look whole to me. Hurting, maybe. But not broken. Never broken. Tears pricked her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. You don't know me well enough to make that assessment. Don't I? His hand came up, cupped her jaw with a gentleness that stole her breath. I know you're strong enough to dress up your pain in emerald silk and walk back into a room full of people who might judge you. I know you're brave enough to confront your past instead of running from it. I know you're honest enough to admit when you're hurting instead of hiding behind a smile. That's not broken, Lillian. That's courage. A tear escaped, traced down her cheek. He caught it with his thumb. 5 minutes are up, he said softly. Do you want to walk away? She should. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was too much, too fast, too intense, that she didn't know this man, didn't understand the pull she felt toward him, couldn't trust what she was feeling when she was still so raw from David. But standing there, wrapped in his jacket, his hand gentle on her face, his eyes holding hers like she was something infinitely precious, she couldn't make herself leave. No, she whispered. I don't want to walk away. Something fierce and triumphant flashed in his eyes. Good, because I'm going to kiss you now. And I need you to tell me if that's not okay. Her heart hammered. Why are you asking permission? Because consent matters. Because you're vulnerable tonight, and I won't take advantage of that. Because when I kiss you, I need you to know it's what you want. Not what you think you should want, or what will hurt someone else or heal some wound. Just you, choosing me, right now. God, when had anyone ever made her feel this seen? This valued? David had kissed her dozens of times, hundreds, and never once had he asked. Never once had he cared about what she wanted versus what served his needs. Yes, she breathed. Kiss me. Alex didn't rush. He gave her time to change her mind, telegraphed his intention in the way he leaned down, his hand sliding from her jaw to tangle in her hair. The strands wrapped around his fingers like silk, and she could feel the slight tremor in his touch, the evidence that he wasn't as controlled as he appeared. His other hand found her waist, pulled her closer until they were pressed together from chest to hip. She could feel the heat of him through her dress, feel the hard planes of his body against her softer curves, feel the rapid beat of his heart that matched her own. When his lips finally met hers, it wasn't tentative or testing. It was claiming. A kiss that said mine with every stroke of his tongue, every tilt of his head, every barely restrained growl that rumbled in his chest. His mouth was hot and demanding, tasting of whiskey and want. He kissed like a man who knew exactly what he wanted and wasn't afraid to take it. But there was care in it, too. Attention to her responses, adjusting when she gasped, soothing when the intensity threatened to overwhelm. Lillian melted into him, all the fight and fury she'd armored herself with dissolving in the heat of his mouth on hers. Her hands came up to grip his shoulders, feeling muscle shift under her palms, then slid around his neck, pulling him down to her, demanding more. She kissed him back with 6 months of loneliness, with years of feeling unseen and undervalued, with a hunger she hadn't known lived inside her. A hunger for connection, for passion, for someone who could match her intensity instead of being exhausted by it. He kissed like a man at war, and she was the spoils, demanding, consuming, yet somehow still careful, still aware of her, reading her body language like it was a language he'd studied, adjusting the angle when she gasped for air, soothing with gentle nips when the intensity became too much, building the heat slowly instead of rushing. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, she was dizzy. The world had narrowed to just this. Just him. Just the way he was looking at her, like she'd fundamentally changed something in him. His forehead rested against hers, his hands still buried in her hair, holding her like she might disappear if he let go, like she was the only solid thing in a world that had gone liquid. Christ, Lillian, he murmured, voice rough. You're going to ruin me. She laughed breathlessly. I think it's the other way around. He pulled back just enough to look at her, and what she saw in his face made her chest tighten. Want. Yes, but also something softer. Something that looked almost like wonder. Let me take you home, he said. Not like that, he added quickly when her eyes widened. I just want more time with you. Away from here. Somewhere we can talk without an audience. She glanced back through the French doors. Inside, the gala continued, oblivious to the small revolution that had just occurred on this terrace. She could see David across the ballroom, still with his brunette, laughing at something someone said. And she felt nothing. Not anger, not pain, not even vindication. Just a distant curiosity about how she'd ever thought he mattered enough to dress for revenge. "Okay," she said, turning back to Alex. "Take me home." His smile was brilliant, transformative. He laced his fingers through hers, the gesture both possessive and protective, and led her back inside. They crossed the ballroom quickly, ignoring the curious stares, the whispered questions. Alex retrieved her coat from the check, helped her into it with the kind of old-fashioned courtesy that should have felt patronizing, but instead felt cherished. His car was waiting with the valet, a black Mercedes, understated but expensive. He opened her door, waited until she was settled, then rounded to the driver's side with athletic grace. As they pulled away from the hotel, Boston's light streaking past the windows, Lillian felt like she was leaving more than just a party. She was leaving behind the woman who'd dressed for revenge, who'd thought she needed validation from someone who'd never valued her. Beside her, Alex drove with quiet confidence, one hand on the wheel, the other reaching over to rest on her knee. A simple touch, but it anchored her, reminded her that whatever this was between them, however insane and impulsive, it was real. "Where are we going?" she asked. "My place. It's on the water in Charlestown. But if that makes you uncomfortable, we can go anywhere you want. A coffee shop, a bar, the middle of Boston Common. I just want to be somewhere I can hear you without shouting over music." The consideration in his words, the way he gave her choices, made her decision easy. "Your place is fine." He squeezed her knee gently, approval and gratitude in the gesture. They drove in comfortable silence through Boston's streets, past Beacon Hill's brick townhouses with their gas lamps glowing warm against the autumn night, their windows revealing glimpses of lives being lived in elegant interiors. Over the Charlestown Bridge, the Zakim Bridge's illuminated cables creating geometric patterns against the dark sky. Toward the waterfront neighborhood that had been revitalized in recent years, old warehouses transformed into luxury living spaces. Alex's building was modern glass and steel, a converted warehouse with a view of the harbor and downtown skyline. The architecture was striking, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that promised unobstructed views of the city. His penthouse occupied the entire top floor. The elevator opened directly into his living space, and Lillian caught her breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city lights reflecting off dark water like a constellation that had fallen to earth. The interior was masculine but not cold. Leather furniture in rich browns, exposed brick walls that spoke to the building's industrial past, lighting fixtures that looked salvaged from old factories but had been carefully restored. But there were books everywhere, stacked on shelves and tables, bookmarks protruding from dozens of spines, and art on the walls that suggested actual taste rather than a decorator's hand. A mix of modern pieces and what looked like vintage military photography, black and white images of soldiers in moments of quiet rather than combat. "This is beautiful," she said, moving toward the windows. The view was breathtaking. She could see the entire harbor spread out below, the lights of planes descending toward Logan Airport, the distant shimmer of the ocean beyond the harbor islands. "Thank you." He appeared beside her with 2 glasses of wine. She hadn't even heard him move. "I bought it as an investment and ended up falling in love with the view." She accepted the wine, sipped. It was excellent, rich and smooth. "Do you always bring women here after knowing them for 20 minutes? His mouth quirked. "I've never brought a woman here." She turned to look at him, searching for the lie. Found only honesty. "Never? This is my space. Private. Mine." He set his own wine down, untouched, and faced her fully. "I don't share it. Until now." "Why now? Why me?" He reached out, tucked that same strand of hair behind her ear again. The gesture was already becoming familiar, almost intimate in its repetition. "Because the moment I saw you, something in me recognized something in you. And I know that sounds insane. I know we're strangers and this is too fast and probably too intense. But I'm done lying to myself about what I want, what I feel. And I want you, Lillian. Not just for tonight. Not just for a few hours. I want to know everything about you. What makes you laugh? What keeps you up at night? What that bastard ex of yours did to make you think you needed to prove anything to anyone. His words should have terrified her. They were too much, too soon, from a man she'd known for less than an hour. But she'd spent a year with David, and he'd never once made her feel as seen as Alex had in 20 minutes. He said I was too much, she found herself saying. Too intense. Too complicated. He wanted someone easier, less maintenance. He was a coward. Alex's voice had gone hard, all the gentleness replaced by something sharp and dangerous. Real men don't want easy. They want real. And you, Lillian, you're so fucking real, it's like standing in a lightning storm. She blinked back tears. Is that a good thing? It's everything. He set her wine aside, framed her face with both hands. I spent years in places where nothing was real, where I had to become someone else to survive, where feelings were a liability and caring about people got you killed. I came back and built a life around control, around discipline, around never letting anyone close enough to matter. Then why? She whispered. Why let me in? Because I'm tired, Lillian. I'm so tired of being alone. And when you walked into that ballroom tonight, looking like vengeance wrapped in silk, hurting and brave and so goddamn beautiful I couldn't breathe, something in me just broke or woke up. I don't know. But I knew I couldn't let you walk away without at least trying. Trying what? This. He kissed her again. Softer this time, but no less devastating. Us. Whatever this is. However crazy it seems. She kissed him back, pouring every ounce of her confusion and fear and desperate hope into it. When they broke apart, she was trembling. I'm scared, she admitted, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. Her voice was small, vulnerable in a way she hated but couldn't hide. Of how much I want this, want you. I don't trust my judgment anymore. David made me feel like I was always wrong, always too much or not enough, always failing at being what someone needed. How do I know this is real, and not just me being reckless because I'm hurt? How do I know I'm not just projecting what I want to see onto you? How do I know I won't wake up 6 months from now and realize I've made the same mistake all over again? The questions had been building in her for weeks, fears she'd pushed down because acknowledging them felt like weakness. But here, now, with him looking at her like she was something precious, the dam broke. Tears spilled over, hot against her cheeks. Alex's expression softened, became something almost unbearably gentle. He pulled her over to the couch, sat and drew her down beside him, keeping her close. One arm wrapped around her shoulders, the other hand finding hers, lacing their fingers together. You don't. Not yet. But here's what I know. I'm not him. I won't make you feel small to make myself feel big. I won't ask you to be less so I can be comfortable with more. I won't criticize your passion or your intensity or your need for deep connection. And I sure as hell won't let you think for 1 second that you're anything other than exactly what I need. Exactly right. Exactly enough. You say that now, she whispered, wiping at her face with her free hand. But what if you get tired of me? What if I become too much even for you? Lillian. He cupped her face, made her look at him. His eyes were fierce, certain in a way that made her chest ache. Listen to me. I've faced enemy combatants. I've made life or death decisions. I've survived things that would break most people. You think your passion exhausts me? Your intensity scares me? Baby, you're the first thing in years that's made me feel alive. You're not too much. You're exactly what I've been missing without knowing it. You don't even know me. Then let me learn. He laced his fingers through hers, brought their joined hands up between them. Start talking. Tell me everything. Your childhood, your dreams, your fears, what you had for breakfast. I want it all. So she did. Sitting there on his couch, the city glittering outside his windows, she told him. About growing up in suburban Connecticut, the daughter of 2 academics who'd loved books more than people. Her childhood had been quiet, intellectual. filled with museums and libraries but lacking in warmth. She'd learned early to find comfort in art, in the stories painted on canvas, in the passion frozen in brushstrokes. About discovering Renaissance art as a teenager and feeling like she'd finally found a language she understood, a way to express all the emotions her parents had never known how to handle. About her first kiss behind the school theater, her first heartbreak when that same boy had moved away, her decision to move to Boston for grad school and never leave. The city had felt like freedom, like possibility, like finally being able to breathe after years of holding it in. She told him about David, how they'd met at a museum fundraiser 3 years ago, how charmed she'd been by his easy confidence, the way he could make anyone feel like the most important person in the room. For the first 6 months, it had been wonderful. He'd taken her to nice restaurants, attended her gallery openings, told her she was brilliant. But then, slowly, imperceptibly, the criticism had started. Her laugh was too loud at his firm's dinner parties. Her passion for her work was excessive, made his colleagues uncomfortable. Why did she always have to discuss such serious topics? Couldn't she just talk about normal things like everyone else? Her need for deep conversation was exhausting him. The critiques came wrapped in concern, in jokes, in casual observations that felt like paper cuts. Small, easy to dismiss individually. But they added up, bleeding her dry one comment at a time, until she'd found herself constantly apologizing for existing, constantly monitoring every word, every gesture, constantly trying to be smaller, quieter, easier, less intense, less passionate, less her. By the end, she'd been a shell of herself, going through the motions, performing the role of girlfriend, of curator, of functioning adult, while inside, she felt hollow. The breakup had been devastating and liberating in equal measure. Proof that she'd failed, but also permission to stop trying to be someone she wasn't. Alex listened without interrupting, his thumb making slow circles on her palm. When she finished, her voice raw, he was silent for a long moment. "I want to find him and break his face," he said finally, conversationally, like he was discussing the weather. She laughed, surprised. "That's your takeaway?" "No." He shifted, pulled her fully into his lap so she was straddling him, forced to look directly into his eyes. "My takeaway is that you survived someone systematically trying to destroy your sense of self, and you're still here, still fighting, still brave enough to put on a dress and walk back into the arena. That's not weakness, Lillian. That's warrior-level strength. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm held together with tape and hope. We all are," he said simply. "That's what makes us human." She searched his face, saw the truth of his own battles written in the lines around his eyes, the set of his jaw. "What happened to you? In the military?" His expression went carefully blank. "Things that would keep you up at night. Tell me anyway." "Why?" "Because you asked me to trust you with my pain, so trust me with yours." Something in him seemed to crack open. He closed his eyes, jaw working. She could see him fighting with himself, deciding how much to share, how vulnerable to be. When he opened them again, they were haunted, windows into a darkness she could only begin to imagine. "I lost people, good people, under my command, because I made choices that seemed right at the time but turned out to be catastrophically wrong. We were on a mission in Kandahar. Intelligence said the building was clear, that we'd have a window of opportunity. I trusted it, led my team in. The intelligence was bad. There was an ambush waiting. 3 of my men didn't make it out. Good men. Men with families, with futures, with every reason to come home. And I'm the one who led them into that trap." His voice had gone flat, empty. The voice of someone reciting facts they'd memorized to avoid feeling them. "I came home decorated and everyone called me a hero, but I can still hear them screaming, still smell the smoke and blood, still see their faces when I close my eyes, still wake up sometimes convinced I'm back there, that I can still save them if I just move fast enough, think smart enough. But I can't. They're gone and I'm here, and there's no logic to it. No fairness. Just loss." She cupped his face. made him look at her, saw the guilt and grief he carried like stones in his pockets, weighing him down even as he tried to stand tall. That doesn't make you less. It makes you human. It makes me damaged. No, she said fiercely. It makes you someone who cared enough to feel loss, who loves enough to carry the weight. You want to know what I see when I look at you? I see someone who's been through hell and came back still capable of kindness, still capable of gentleness, still capable of seeing someone else's pain and wanting to ease it. That's not damaged, Alex. That's beautiful. His arms came around her, crushed her to him, his face buried in her neck. She felt him shudder, felt the careful control he always maintained slip just enough for her to glimpse the man underneath, scarred, weary, but fighting to be whole. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped around each other, breathing in sync. The city continued outside, oblivious. Time lost meaning. Finally, Alex pulled back just enough to look at her. Stay tonight. Her heart skipped. Alex, I don't think... Not for that, he interrupted. Just stay. Sleep here. Let me hold you. I want to wake up and know this was real. That you were real. It was crazy. Reckless. Everything she'd sworn she wouldn't do after David. But looking into his eyes, seeing the vulnerability he was offering her, the trust, she couldn't say no. Okay, she whispered. I'll stay. He stood, lifting her with him like she weighed nothing, and carried her to his bedroom. It was as masculine as the rest of the apartment, dominated by a massive bed with crisp white linens. He set her down gently, then disappeared into what she assumed was the bathroom. He returned with one of his t-shirts, soft and worn. To sleep in, unless you'd prefer to borrow something else. She took it, grateful. This is perfect. He turned his back while she changed, a gesture of respect that made her chest ache. When she was done, he stripped down to boxer briefs, completely unself-conscious. His body was magnificent, all lean muscle and old scars, stories written on skin. He slipped into bed beside her, pulled her against his chest. She fit perfectly, her head tucked under his chin, her hand over his heart. She could feel it beating, steady and strong. Thank you, she whispered into the darkness. For what? For seeing me. Really seeing me. His arms tightened around her. Thank you for letting me. She fell asleep like that, cocooned in his warmth, feeling safer than she had in months. Years, maybe. She didn't dream, didn't wake, just slept, deep and dreamless, while Alex held her through the night. When morning light filtered through the windows, she woke slowly, disoriented. For a moment, she didn't remember where she was. The bed was unfamiliar, the sheets softer than hers, the light coming from the wrong direction. Then memory returned in a rush. The gala. Alex. The terrace. This penthouse. His arms around her all night, holding her like she was something precious. The bed was empty beside her, but she could smell coffee and hear movement in the kitchen. Something sizzling in a pan. The domestic normality of it made her chest ache in the best way. She patted out, still wearing his shirt that fell to mid-thigh, her blonde hair tousled from sleep. Her feet were bare on the cool hardwood floor, and she felt exposed in the morning light, vulnerable in a way she hadn't in the darkness. She found him at the stove, making eggs. He'd put on pajama pants but remained shirtless, and she took a moment to simply appreciate the view. His back was a landscape of muscle and scars, each mark telling a story. Some were surgical, neat lines. Others were jagged, violent, evidence of a life lived dangerously. But there was beauty in it too, in the way he moved, in the strength evident in every line of him. He looked up when she entered, and his smile was like sunrise, warm, real, transforming his entire face from hard to something softer, younger, happier. Good morning. Morning. She felt suddenly shy, aware of how intimate this was. Waking up in his space, wearing his clothes, watching him cook breakfast. It felt like crossing a threshold, stepping into something that could become habit, could become home. Coffee? He nodded toward a mug already waiting on the counter. She took it gratefully, sipped. It was perfect. strong and black, the way she preferred. How did you know how I take my coffee? I didn't. Just made it how I like it and hoped. She laughed. We have compatible coffee preferences. That's promising. I think we have compatible everything. He plated the eggs, set 2 places at his small dining table. Come eat. They ate in comfortable silence, stealing glances at each other. In the morning light, with his hair slightly mussed and his jaw shadowed with stubble, he looked younger, less intimidating, but no less magnetic. What happens now? She asked finally, setting down her fork. He reached across the table, laced his fingers through hers. Whatever you want. If you need time, I'll give you time. If you need space, I'll give you space. But I need you to know I'm not going anywhere. Last night wasn't a fluke or a one-time thing. I meant what I said. I want this. Want you. For as long as you'll have me. This is insane. We barely know each other. Then let's change that. Have dinner with me. Tonight. Tomorrow. Every night, until you know me as well as I want to know you. She studied him, searching for the catch, the angle, the moment where the mask would slip, and he'd reveal himself to be just another David. But all she saw was sincerity. Raw, unfiltered hope. Okay, she said. Dinner. Tonight. His smile could have powered the city. Yeah? Yeah. But Alex, I need this to be slow. I need to rebuild my trust in my own judgment before I can fully trust this. Can you be patient with that? Lillian, I'll wait as long as it takes. I've been alone for years. I can wait a little longer to do this right. She stood, walked around the table, and kissed him. Soft, promising. Then take me home. I need to change and go to work, and try to process the fact that my life just completely changed in 12 hours. He kissed her back, gentle and reverent. I'll drive you. The drive back to her apartment in Back Bay was quiet, charged with promise. When they pulled up outside her building, a brownstone converted to condos, he came around to open her door. Tonight, he said. I'll pick you up at 7. I'll be ready. He kissed her once more, brief but searing, then watched as she made her way inside. She felt his eyes on her the entire time, protective and possessive in equal measure. In her apartment, she leaned against the closed door and tried to catch her breath. Her dress from last night was draped over her arm, his jacket still wrapped around her shoulders. Evidence that it had been real, that he was real. Her phone buzzed. A text from Alex. Already missing you. Is that pathetic? She smiled, typed back. Only if me missing you too is equally pathetic. His response was immediate. Then we can be pathetic together. See you tonight, beautiful. She floated through her day at the museum in a daze. Sarah cornered her at lunch, demanding details about why she'd disappeared from the gala. Lillian tried to explain, stumbling over words, aware of how crazy it all sounded. Meeting a stranger, leaving with him, spending the night, planning to see him again. But Sarah just grinned. Finally. Someone who looks at you like you hung the moon. About damn time. I'm terrified, Lillian admitted. Of course you are. But maybe that's good. Maybe that means it matters. That night, Alex arrived exactly at 7, punctual in a way that spoke of military training and respect for her time. He wore dark jeans that fit him perfectly, and a black Henley that showcased his physique without trying, the fabric clinging to shoulders and arms that spoke of hours in the gym. He held flowers, simple and elegant. Peonies her favorite, their petals soft and pink and perfect, though she'd never told him her preference. How did you know? She asked, accepting them with surprise and pleasure warming her chest. She brought them to her nose, breathed in their delicate scent. A hint of a smile played at his lips, transforming his face from severe to almost boyish. I called the museum and asked what kind of flowers you had in your office. Your assistant was very helpful once I explained I was trying to impress you. She also told me you take your coffee black, that you're usually there by 7:30 in the morning, and that you tend to skip lunch when you're working on a new exhibition. She laughed, charmed and exasperated, and touched that he'd gone to such lengths. That's cheating. That's strategy, he corrected, reaching out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear in the gesture that was already becoming familiar, already feeling like his. There's a difference. In my line of work, intelligence gathering is essential. Why would I approach the most important mission of my life any differently? Most important mission? She raised an eyebrow, but her heart was racing. Winning you, he said simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Everything else is just details. He took her to a small Italian restaurant in the North End, the kind of place that had been family-owned for generations and didn't bother with fancy decor because the food spoke for itself. The walls were covered with old photographs of Italy, faded and yellowing with age. Red and white checked tablecloths. Candles and wine bottles crusted with years of melted wax. The air was thick with the smell of garlic and tomatoes and fresh bread, making her mouth water before they even sat down. The owner greeted Alex by name, a round Italian man in his 60s, who embraced him like family, then teased him about finally bringing a date. "Alexandro, you bring me a beautiful woman at last. I tell you for years, you need to stop working so much. Find someone to make you smile. And look at this one. Bellissima." Alex introduced her with a pride that made her blush, his hand at the small of her back, possessive and warm. They were shown to a corner table, intimate and private, with a view of the street outside where North End locals passed by, arguing in Italian, laughing, living their lives with a passion that felt distinctly un-Bostonian. Over pasta that melted on her tongue and wine that was probably too expensive for a casual dinner, they talked. About everything and nothing. Books and movies and childhood memories, hopes and fears and dreams. He told her about growing up in Vermont, youngest of 3 boys, his father a contractor, his mother a teacher. How he'd joined the military to pay for college and discovered he was good at it, maybe too good. She told him about curating her first exhibition, how terrified she'd been, how it had felt like exposing her soul for judgment, how her parents had shown up late and left early, more interested in the academic aspects than her actual achievement. With every word, every shared laugh, every moment of comfortable silence, Lillian felt herself falling. It was terrifying and exhilarating, different than it had been with David, where she'd molded herself to fit his expectations. With Alex, she was simply herself, prickly and complicated and intense, and he seemed to love every difficult piece of her, seemed to want more of what David had found exhausting. They fell into a rhythm over the following weeks. Dinners that started as dates and became rituals. Long walks through Boston's neighborhoods where he'd point out buildings his company protected, and she'd tell him about hidden galleries most tourists missed. Movies on his couch where they'd debate the cinematography and he'd pull her close during the scary parts, even though she insisted she wasn't afraid. Museum visits where she'd explain the symbolism in Renaissance paintings, the way Botticelli used gold leaf to suggest divinity, the hidden meanings in the positioning of hands and flowers, and he'd listen like she was revealing the secrets of the universe, asking questions that proved he was actually paying attention, actually interested in what mattered to her. He started keeping her favorite tea at his place. She started keeping a toothbrush there. Small intimacies that added up to something bigger. He learned that she was grumpy before coffee and soft after wine, that she talked with her hands when she was passionate about something, that she cried during any movie involving dogs. She learned that he woke at 5 a.m. no matter what time he went to sleep, that he read military history and poetry in equal measure, that he had a scar on his left shoulder blade from shrapnel and one on his right thigh from a training accident years before deployment. He was patient, never pushing for more than she was ready to give, but the chemistry between them was undeniable, a current that hummed between them whenever they touched. Every touch burned. Every kiss left her wanting more. It was just a matter of time before the dam broke, before the careful distance they'd been maintaining became impossible to sustain. It happened on a Friday night, 3 weeks after they'd met. They'd had dinner at her place, cooked together in her tiny kitchen, laughing when they kept bumping into each other in the limited space. He'd chopped vegetables while she'd managed the sauce, both of them moving in a dance that felt surprisingly natural for 2 people still learning each other's rhythms. They'd drunk wine, and talked about nothing and everything. comfortable in the kind of silence that only comes when two people are genuinely at ease with each other. After, they'd settled on her couch with wine, her curled into his side like it was the most natural thing in the world, his arm around her shoulders, her hand resting on his chest where she could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong. The window was open, letting in cool autumn air and the sounds of the city. Somewhere nearby, someone was playing piano. The music drifted through the night, melancholy and beautiful. "I love this," she said quietly, feeling brave with wine and comfort and the security of his presence. "Being with you. It feels easy in a way nothing else in my life has." He pressed a kiss to her temple, lingering. "That's because it's right. We're right." She turned to look up at him, and something in his eyes made her breath catch, heat and tenderness, and barely restrained want. "I'm done being patient," she whispered, the words coming from somewhere deep inside her, from a place that was tired of being careful, tired of protecting herself, tired of not reaching for what she wanted. His eyes darkened. "Lillian, no, listen. I know you're trying to be respectful, trying to give me time, but I'm ready. I want this. Want you. All of you. Are you sure?" His voice had gone rough. "Because once I have you, Lillian, I'm not letting go." "Good," she whispered. "Don't." He kissed her then, all the restraint he'd been maintaining for weeks finally breaking. It was consuming, possessive, acclaiming. She met him with equal fervor, months of loneliness and weeks of anticipation pouring into every touch. He lifted her, carried her to her bedroom, laid her on the bed like she was precious. Then he proceeded to worship every inch of her, taking his time, learning what made her gasp, what made her arch, what made her cry his name. When he finally made her his, it was everything she'd needed and more. Intense, connected, real. She felt seen in a way that went beyond the physical, like he was touching her soul, like every barrier she'd erected was dissolving under his careful attention. He moved with the same controlled power she'd sensed in him from the beginning. But there was gentleness, too. A reverence in the way he touched her that made tears prick behind her closed eyelids. He whispered her name like a prayer, told her she was beautiful, perfect, his. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, she believed it. After, wrapped in his arms, breathless and overwhelmed, she felt tears slip down her cheeks. They came from nowhere and everywhere, from relief and release, and the terrifying vulnerability of being truly seen by another person. "Hey," he said softly, turning her face toward him with gentle fingers. His gray eyes were concerned, searching her face for signs of regret or pain. "What's wrong? Did I hurt you?" "Nothing," she managed, her voice thick. "Everything's right. That's what scares me." The tears kept coming, hot against her cooling skin. "I didn't know it could be like this. I didn't know I could feel like this. David, never. We never. It was never this." Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something fierce and possessive. He pulled her closer, if that was even possible, tucked her head under his chin. "I know, but we'll figure it out, together. Promise?" The word came out small, childlike, all her fears condensed into one syllable. "I promise. You're stuck with me now, Lillian Ziegler. I told you I wouldn't let go, and I meant it. You're mine now, and I take care of what's mine." She laughed through her tears. "What if I drive you crazy? What if I'm too much? Then I'll be crazy, and you'll never be too much. You're exactly enough." The weeks turned into months. They navigated the complexities of merging their lives with surprising ease and occasional friction. Meeting each other's friends, where his former military brothers sized her up with protective eyes before accepting her into their circle. Integrating their schedules, learning to balance her gallery events with his unpredictable work hours when clients needed security assessments at odd times. Learning to fight and make up, discovering that conflict didn't mean the end, that they could disagree about where to eat dinner, or whether to spend Christmas with his family in Vermont, or hers in Connecticut, and still choose each other. Still come back to the fundamental truth that they were better together than apart. Alex was everything David hadn't been. Present, texting her throughout the day just to check in, to share something funny he'd seen, to tell her he was thinking of her. Attentive, remembering details she'd mentioned in passing, surprising her with her favorite pastries from the North End bakery she loved. Supportive of her career without being intimidated by it, understanding that sometimes she needed to work late for an exhibition opening, encouraging her when she was nervous about giving a lecture. He showed up to her gallery events in his sharp suits, asked thoughtful questions about her work, bragged about her accomplishments to anyone who would listen with a pride that made her chest ache. And while the world saw him as formidable, the security expert who commanded respect, and sometimes fear with his intensity and reputation, with her he was gentle, protective in a way that felt like shelter rather than control, devoted in a way that made her feel cherished rather than owned. He had a tenderness reserved only for her, a softness that only she witnessed. It was like being trusted with a secret, being shown the heart that beat beneath all that armor. In boardrooms he was steel, with enemies he was ice, but with her, he was warmth and safety, and home. But it wasn't without challenges. His nightmares still came sometimes, dragging him back to battlefields she'd never seen, to moments of violence and loss he tried to shield her from even in sleep. She learned to wake him gently, to hold him while he remembered where he was, who he was with, to be his anchor when the past tried to pull him under, to whisper his name until his breathing slowed, until the rigid tension in his muscles eased, until he could believe he was safe. Those nights, he'd hold her so tight it almost hurt, his face buried in her neck, breathing her in like she was oxygen. And he did the same for her on the bad days, when David's voice echoed in her head, telling her she was too much, too loud, too intense. When she'd catch herself monitoring her laughter at dinner with friends, or apologizing for being passionate about her work, or trying to make herself smaller out of old habit, Alex would pull her close and remind her of her strength, her worth, her beauty. Would love her so thoroughly she couldn't doubt it. Would look at her with such fierce certainty that she was exactly what he needed, exactly right, that the old voices would quiet, at least for a while. Healing wasn't linear, they both learned. It was 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But they took those steps together. 6 months after they met, Alex took her back to the Boston Harbor Hotel, back to the scene of their beginning. She'd assumed it was just dinner, dressed in another emerald dress because he'd once mentioned how much he loved that color on her. This one was different from the first, more flowing, with delicate straps and a neckline that dipped lower. But it carried the same promise, the same sense of occasion. She'd caught him watching her as she got ready at his place, something unreadable in his expression. The taxi ride had been quiet, his hand holding hers tightly, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm that seemed almost nervous. She'd tried to make conversation, but he'd been distracted, answering in monosyllables, his attention somewhere else entirely. It wasn't like him. Usually he was present, engaged, asking about her day. The silence made her anxious, made her wonder if something was wrong. But instead of the restaurant, he led her to the terrace where they'd first kissed. It was October again, the anniversary of their meeting. The air was crisp and cool, carrying that particular autumn scent of fallen leaves and approaching winter. The harbor was dark except for reflected city lights, the same view that had witnessed their beginning. Someone had strung fairy lights along the railing, creating a soft glow that made everything feel magical, suspended outside of normal time. "Do you remember this place?" he asked, his hand warm in hers, his voice rough with emotion she couldn't quite name. "How could I forget? This is where my life changed." She turned to face him, searching his face in the dim light. "Alex, what's going on? You've been strange all evening. How could I forget? This is where my life changed." He turned to face her, and something in his expression made her heart stutter. There was vulnerability there, raw and unguarded in a way she'd never seen from him before. This man who faced down threats for a living, who commanded respect with his presence alone, looked nervous. Mine, too. I came to that gala expecting nothing. Another obligation, another evening of small talk and pretense, Another night of going through the motions while feeling nothing. Instead, I found you. And you were everything I didn't know I'd been searching for. Everything I'd convinced myself didn't exist. Alex. Her voice broke. She could feel where this was going, could feel the moment expanding, becoming something that would change everything. Let me finish. He took both her hands in his, and she could feel them trembling slightly. You asked me once if I believed in fate. I told you I believed in choice, and I stand by that. But I think fate put you in my path that night, gave me the opportunity, and I chose to follow. I chose you that night, standing there in your emerald dress looking like courage wrapped in silk. And I've chosen you every day since. Every morning when I wake up and you're the first thing I think about. Every night when I go to sleep grateful you're in my life. Every moment in between when something happens, and my first instinct is to tell you, to share it with you, because nothing feels complete until you know about it. And if you'll let me, I'll choose you every day for the rest of my life. I'll choose you when it's easy and when it's hard. When you're happy and when you're struggling. When life is good and when it's falling apart. I'll choose you, Lillian. Always. He dropped to one knee, and Lillian's breath caught. The city glittered around them, oblivious. Someone was playing music in one of the nearby buildings, something classical and beautiful. The moment felt suspended, perfect, like the universe was holding its breath. From his pocket, he produced a small velvet box. Inside, a ring glittered under the fairy lights. Simple and elegant, an emerald surrounded by diamonds that caught the light and threw it back in sparks of green and white fire. Lillian Ziegler, you are the bravest, most beautiful, most infuriatingly perfect woman I've ever known. His voice was rough with emotion, his gray eyes holding hers with an intensity that stole her breath. You make me better. You make me whole. You make me believe I deserve happiness after all the darkness I've seen. Marry me. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that you're not too much, that you're exactly what I need. That being intense and passionate and complicated isn't a flaw. It's what makes you extraordinary. Let me love you the way you deserve to be loved. Completely. Fiercely. Without reservation. Always. Tears streamed down her face. Yes. God, yes. He slipped the ring on her finger, then stood and kissed her. The same place where he'd claimed her 6 months ago. Where she'd begun to heal. Where they'd both begun to believe in second chances. Around them, the city sparkled. Behind them, the ballroom music drifted out. But they were in their own world, wrapped around each other, complete. I love you, she whispered against his lips. I love you so much it terrifies me. Good, he murmured back. We can be terrified together. They were married in the spring, on a day when Boston was finally shaking off winter's grip and remembering how to bloom. A small ceremony at the museum surrounded by Renaissance art and the people they loved. She'd chosen the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum for its intimacy, its beauty, its sense of being a secret garden in the heart of the city. The courtyard was filled with spring flowers, wisteria hanging in purple cascades, the sound of the fountain creating a peaceful backdrop. Sarah stood as her maid of honor, crying happy tears before the ceremony even began, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue while trying not to ruin her makeup. His former military brothers stood with him, fierce and loyal in their dress uniforms, men who'd seen the worst of him and loved him anyway. Men who'd watched him transform from the closed-off soldier who'd returned from war to the man who could smile like he meant it, who could laugh without it sounding hollow. The ceremony was simple, but profound. Lillian had walked down the makeshift aisle alone, choosing to give herself to this new life, rather than being given by her distant parents. And when she'd seen Alex waiting for her at the end, looking devastating in his tuxedo, but more importantly looking at her like she was his entire world, she'd known with absolute certainty that this was right, that every painful moment, every wrong turn, every heartbreak had been necessary to lead her here. When the officiant asked Alex to speak his vows, he took Lillian's hands, and his voice was steady, but thick with emotion. I spent years at war, searching for something to fight for. Then I found you, and I realized I'd been fighting the wrong battles. You're worth every fight, every challenge, every moment of fear. You're my peace in the chaos, my home, and I promise to spend every day earning the gift of your trust, your love, your beautiful, complicated, intense heart. I promise to never make you smaller to make myself comfortable. I promise to see you, really see you, every single day. And I promise to love you, fiercely and completely, until my last breath. By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye among the small gathering, including Lillian's. Several of his military brothers were wiping at their faces, not bothering to hide their emotion. Her own vows were simpler, but no less profound. You found me on a night when I thought I needed revenge, and instead you gave me redemption. You taught me that being too much for the wrong person means being perfect for the right one. You've shown me what real love looks like: patient, honest, brave. I promise to be your safe place, your peace, your home. I promise to love all of you, the warrior and the gentleman underneath. Today, tomorrow, always. They sealed their promises with a kiss that felt like coming home. Like every painful moment, every wrong turn, every heartbreak had led them here. To each other. To this. Their reception was at his penthouse, overlooking the water where they'd first talked through the night, where she'd first trusted him with her pain, and he'd trusted her with his. The space had been transformed with flowers and lights, but it was still recognizably his. Still the place where they'd built the foundation of what they'd become. String lights were woven through the exposed beams, casting a soft glow. Tables were scattered throughout, intimate groupings that encouraged conversation. The doors to the terrace were open, letting in the spring breeze that smelled of water and possibility. As they danced to their first song as husband and wife, something slow and romantic that Sarah had helped her choose, Lillian looked up at the man holding her and felt overwhelming gratitude. Not just for him, though he was everything, but for the journey that had led her here, for the pain that had forced her to grow, for the strength she'd discovered in her own brokenness, for the courage it had taken to try again after David had made her feel like trying was pointless. "What are you thinking?" Alex asked, his gray eyes soft in the dim light, his hand warm at her waist. The band they'd hired played softly, and around them their guests swayed to the music, lost in their own moments. "That I'm glad I wore that emerald dress." She smiled up at him, felt tears prick behind her eyes but didn't fight them. "That I'm glad you were watching. That I'm glad you were brave enough to stop me from making a mistake and offer me a better choice. That I'm glad I was brave enough to take it." He smiled, pressed a kiss to her forehead that lingered, reverent. "Best decision I ever made. Stopping me or asking me to dance. All of it. Every single choice that led me to you." His arms tightened around her, and she could feel him breathing her in, memorizing this moment. "Every mission I ran that taught me to recognize something worth fighting for. Every nightmare that taught me to appreciate peace. Every lonely night that taught me to value connection. It all led here. To you. To us." The city glittered around them. Their friends and family celebrated nearby. But in that moment, wrapped in each other's arms, they were alone in the best way. Together. Chosen. Home. And somewhere in the universe, fate and choice smiled at each other, satisfied with a job well done. Years would pass. They would face challenges, as all couples do. His business would grow. Her career would flourish. They would fight and make up. Weather storms. Celebrate victories. Maybe, eventually, there would be children. A house with more room, but always with a view of the water. Always with space for both of them to breathe while still holding tight to each other. But on that night, their wedding night, dancing in the penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor, they were simply two people who'd found each other against impossible odds. Two people who'd been brave enough to choose love even when it seemed crazy, even when it was terrifying, even when it required them to trust again after being broken. "Thank you," Lillian whispered as the song ended. "For what? For seeing me. For claiming me. For loving me exactly as I am." Alex cupped her face in his hands, thumbs stroking her cheeks. "Thank you for letting me, for trusting me with your heart, for being brave enough to take a chance on a stranger who couldn't look away." She kissed him, soft and promising. Best chance I ever took. Around them, their new life waited, full of possibility, full of promise, full of the kind of love that transforms, that heals, that makes two people believe that maybe, just maybe, they were always meant to find each other. That sometimes, the best things happen when you least expect them. When you're dressed for revenge, but find redemption instead. When you're looking for validation, but find love. When a stranger becomes home, and a kiss becomes forever. The city lights reflected off the harbor, painting everything in gold. And in a penthouse overlooking it all, two hearts beat in sync. Finally home. Finally whole. Finally exactly where they were always meant to be. Together. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.